But tonight, we're about the root of all evil. I'm going to read this because most students I have don't think this is in the Bible, but it is. We could do a whole series on what people think is in the Bible but isn't, and what is in the Bible, but that would be an amazing series. But yes, this is in the Bible, 1 Timothy. But godliness actually is a means of great gain. Notice the language here. When accompanied by contentment, for we have brought nothing into this world, so we cannot take anything out of it either. If we have food and covering with these, we shall be content. But those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a snare, and many foolish and harmful desires, which plunge men into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all sorts of evil. And some, by longing for it, have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. I always love doing these talks because I learn so much, and I learned about Moneta this time. I've traveled with a few gods and goddesses in my time, but I had not met Moneta. The surname of the Roman goddess Juno, Greek goddess Hera, near whose temple money was coined, right? And so you've got Zeus's wife who has her own temple, and then that's where the money is minted. And so all these symbols get mixed up, all these meanings get mixed up together, and so she becomes related to the Latin word monere, advise or warn, and so the admonishing goddess. Money as the admonishing goddess. Sounds right, doesn't it? Well, what we like to do here at UPR is understand the deepest meanings of these things. And to do that, you usually have to go back. And we often go back to etymology, as we just did. And we often go back to human cultures as best we know them. Especially pre-literate or oral cultures and what we learn from those. So a sacrifice is God's currency. It always has been. The currency of the divine. So you have to give back what's been received. This actually makes a lot of sense. If you live, as many primal or oral cultures did, on the bounty of the harvest or not, or the availability of game or not, then your life was constantly on the edge. And it makes perfect sense to me, in a mythological sense at least, maybe not a logical sense, but in a mythological sense, to say thank you and to give back. Because we live in a world where there are forces out there that we don't know anything about. And it doesn't have to be small, this notion of giving back. It can be a recognition that we don't know everything and that there are forces that are more powerful than us. Now, what we saw in the talk on technology is that we kind of lost that sense because we created all this technology. And so we maybe have lost that enchantment that Jung talked about. But you should give back what you get, because what you get for most of our time on the planet has been very tentative. You never know it's coming. And often it doesn't come. And you watch people die or you die. So it's a gift. Life is a gift. And the things that support life, water, sun, food, those are gifts too, right? And so there's I hate the word natural, but there is a kind of natural sense of, hey, this bounty came to me, let me give some of it back. Now, you can give it back to each other, that's fine. Or you can give it back to the God, which is ultimately giving it back to the unknown force. You can also give forward. And we talked a little bit about magic last time, magic as a kind of technology. And you can say, okay, look, I'm going to need this in the future. So let me give you, Lord, God, Goddess, let me give you this now so that you can pay me back eventually, right? I think we still do this. I think it's just our mental conversation now instead of some actual sacrifice. But when you've had too much Maker's Mark, and you say, if you'll just get me through this, I'll never do this again. Maybe you know what I'm talking about. You bargain, and you bargain ahead. Sometimes you bargain backwards, sometimes you bargain forwards. All this happens, of course, in a ritual context, and that's what we've lost. I don't mean to say that in such a stark way, but I don't think we have many rituals. I think it's fair to say that we don't have many ritual contexts anymore in which to say, hey, I'm giving a sacrifice. I'm working in God's currency here through an exchange. We just don't have that. And yet, it's such a part of our existence, especially Christianity. The wages of sin is death. The wages of sin. The wages of sin. This economic model is shot through the Hebrew Bible and even more so in the New Testament. And in fact, I don't think it's made any more dramatic it's made more dramatic anywhere than in the book of Job, my favorite book in the Bible. Let me refresh your recollection, as the lawyers say. Job is a good man. It's one of the oldest texts in the Hebrew Bible. He's a good man. And he ensures his goodness by sacrificing. In fact, Job is so good that he sacrifices for his children in case they forgot to sacrifice. He's that guy. He's awesome. He's got all his bases covered. He writes all his checks. He pays all his bills because for him, his relationship with God is contractual, right? He uses the currency, divine currency, of if I'm good, you will be good to me. Yeah, we're in touch with that, right? If I'm good, the world will be good to me. Good things will happen. And the genius of the book of Job is that it opens with a behind-the-scenes scene. And we learn that all this that happens in the book is because God and a figure called Satan have a bet. A bet. Now, poor Job, he's this guy. He's like, oh, God, okay, I'm just going to do everything right so that I get paid. And I don't need to be paid in wealth. I just need to be paid in God's love. But guess how I know God loves me? He gives me lots of cattle and sons and daughters, right? And this is such good writing because the audience is in on the joke. And poor Job is such a sap. Meanwhile, this Satan figure, who's not the devil, by the way, he's a recognizable Jewish figure whose the word simply means adversary. He's like a prosecuting attorney. And he comes before God and says, I'll bet you that if you break your contract, the implied contract with Job, I bet you he'll curse you to your face. And God says, I'll take that bet. I'm all in. Actually, he's not all in because they keep betting. And so Job's life turns to tragedy. He loses all his cattle, his wealth, his sons, his health. It's been said that the only hero in the book of Job is his wife, who comes out while he's sitting on a plane scraping his sores with pottery shards. She says, curse God and die. Because she's the only one who makes any sense. But he doesn't. He doesn't curse God, but man, is he pissed. Because God broke the contract. They had a contract, and God broke it, and he did. And in fact, the ending of the book is fantastic because I didn't tell you about the three friends, but basically his three friends come and they have a poetry slam is what they have. They really do. It's about suffering, but it's some of the finest poetry you will ever read, but it's about suffering, and it goes back and forth, and Job and the friend. And basically their position is, dude, you did something wrong. You broke the contract. And Job's like, God damn it, literally, God damn it, I did not break this contract. I am due. You owe me. And it ends by God coming down and saying, you're right, Job, let me give you all this back. No, of course it doesn't end that way. Interestingly, some editor of the book of Job later on thought it should end that way. And so this editor tacked this on because they couldn't deal with the power and the poetry of the book of Job, where God comes down in the form of a whirlwind and says, contract? What contract, dude? Were you there when I created the hippopotamus? That's what he says. And Job's like, well, no. And he's like, well, were you there when I made the stars, when I made Leviathan in the sea? Were you there? And, this goes on for pages and pages. And Job's like, no, dude, I wasn't there. And God says, then shut up. That's a Hebrew translation. But the real ending of the book of Job is this. And Job was comforted that he was dust. This is before the stupid editor tries to fix everything. Like, he got notes from the production company. And Job was comforted that he was dust. There is no contract. There is no exchange other than you get to live for a while until you turn to dust. This happens often, actually, this affair we have with the notion of exchange, especially divine exchange. There is a god of money, Plutus in Greek. The name literally means wealth, as eros literally means love or lust. He was at first concerned quite naturally with agricultural bounty, because that is your wealth in an early society, but becomes associated with wealth in general. And this is Hesiod speaking of this god, Plutus. Demeter, this is from the Theogony. Demeter, a bright goddess, was joined in sweet love with the hero Aeacian in a thrice-plowed fallow in the rich land of Crete, and bare Plutus, a kindly god who goes everywhere over land and the sea's wide back, and him who finds him and into whose hands he comes, he makes rich, bestowing great wealth upon him. What an awesome god. This is Aesop from the Fables. Hercules, and Plutus. Riches are justly hated by courageous men, because a coffer of cash brings an end to honest traffic and praise. Thanks to his excellent qualities, Heracles was given a place in heaven. He saluted the gods who came to congratulate him one after another. But when Plutus, wealth, the son of Tyche, fortune, approached him, Heracles turned his eyes aside. Father Zeus asked him why he did this, and Heracles answered, I hate the god of riches, because he's a friend to the wicked, while he also corrupts the entire world by throwing his money around. Aristophanes has a play he wrote later in his life about this god, Plutus. And it involves these guys, and they go to the temple, and Apollo instructs the guys to follow the first man that they meet on leaving the temple and persuade him to come home. The first man he meets is a blind beggar. But when the main character, Crimelos, persists in following him anyway, he discovers that he is in fact Plutus, the god of wealth, whom Zeus has robbed of his eyesight, so that he would be unable to distinguish between the just and the unjust. After much argument, Plutus enters Camillus' house. Camillus is convinced that if Pluto's eyesight can be restored, then there's hope that wealth will be distributed to the virtuous rather than randomly, thus making the world a better place. On arriving at the house, they encounter a ragged goddess named Poverty, who has been living with Camillus for many years. She argues that without poverty, there would be no slaves, since every slave would buy his freedom, and no fine goods or luxury foods, because no one would work if they were already rich. But Camillus is unimpressed by her arguments. Plutus' eyesight's restored at the temple of Asclepius, the great healer, and he formally becomes a member of the household. And he begins to hand out riches to more deserving people, including Camillus, of course, who's brought him home, and to remove his riches from the unvirtuous, effectively turning the world upside down economically and socially. Predictably, this creates utter chaos. In the end, the messenger of the god Hermes has to inform Camillus that the gods are pissed because they've been starved of their sacrifices and the homage due to the Olympian gods. All humanity's attention has now been directed to Plutus, the god of wealth, and the other gods are going without attention. So, Camillus says that Plutus should replace Zeus as the king of the gods, and that does not work out well, as you might guess. Wonderful play. Aristophanes is a great comic. Aristotle and the social construction of money. So, we've already seen that sacrifice is a medium of exchange, or was a medium of exchange at least. We need mediums of exchange. And Aristotle was the first to talk about the social construction of money. He calls it nomisma, from which we get the word numismatics, right? Collector of coins, etc. And it's from the Greek word nomon, which means law. So it's a kind of law. Now, when Aristotle talks about law, he's talking about the social construction of something, a societal thing that we have created to use. And so money is a law. It is a social construction that we use to exchange things. Because if you have a fisherman and a baker and a carpenter, and they need things, how do you work out the medium of exchange? Well, I'll build you a house for a couple of fishes, or, that's impossible, ultimately impossible to work out. The barter system is unsustainable, of course, because you need things that the other person cannot provide or provides too much of. And the same holds true for you. There's not an equal exchange available until you introduce money. Money is that agnostic social construction that does not itself carry value, but carries value only in relation to what you're exchanging it for. But the genius of it is that you can exchange it for anything. Anything. It's a fair mediator of what we have to do to live. It is our mediator. Money is our mediator. And so it then becomes, it's this very, I was almost going to say concrete, but it's not even concrete. We can talk about coinage and paper, but ultimately the meaning of money is not concrete. It is symbolic. This $10 bill represents one coffee at Starbucks, right? And so because it's this signifying, I should say signifying, it's engaging in the signifying function, it easily slips over into the symbolizing function. So it means more than just the venti latte. It means you can afford a venti latte. And now and besides, it's already embedded in society. Remember, it's already cultural. And so it immediately moves into the social construction of reality, right? Aristotle talks about the oikonomika, from which we get the word economy and economics. It's the law of the house. Very interesting. Houses in ancient Greece and Rome were usually the domain of the wives. And so actually it's pretty interesting. Christianity starts in houses in Jerusalem because Christians couldn't meet anywhere else. It was too dangerous. And so there's a real sense in which early Christianity is feminine in the sense that it is feminine-led, it is woman-led. And so there are these senses of mutuality and partnership that quickly get washed away as Christianity, especially when it becomes the official religion of Rome. So for Aristotle, there is economics, which is what most of us engage in. Do I have enough for a taco? Do I have enough for an Uber to get to the taco stand, or do I have to choose between that and doing laundry? That's the law of economics. That's the law of the house. It's like the comings and goings, the revenues and the expenses. But he also talked about krematistike, which was this other law, which was really just plain greed. It is wealth beyond necessity. And he said it was unvirtuous. Because for Aristotle, virtue lies in the golden mean, right? So courage lies somewhere between being foolhardy and running into battle that you know you're not going to win and you're going to die at, and being cowardly. Courage is kind of in that golden mean. Well, money and wealth, the law of the house is in between the law of wealth and poverty. In fact, the Buddha teaches a kind of golden mean. And what he said, we talked about this last time a little bit, Aristotle's four causes. Let me just tell you, because I skipped over it last time. There's the material cause, that out of which something comes. So the bronze of a statue, for example. The formal cause, the shape of the thing. The shape of the statue, this bronze statue. The efficient cause, the primary source of the change that occurs. So the artisan, right? The efficient cause is the artist. And then the final cause, its end, that which it is made for. So health is the end of walking. Beauty is the end of the artist, etc. Now he's very interested in this thing he calls entelikeia, or enteleke in English, which is where the final cause is contained within itself, and that is something like God or money. It's really interesting. We give Christianity a hard time in here sometimes, and for good reason. I don't apologize for that, but they got this right in the New Testament. Again, I don't think people know this is in there, and we can talk about why if you want, but listen to this. This is Matthew 19. Jesus said to his disciples, "Truly I tell you, it's hard for someone who's rich to enter the kingdom of heaven." It's hard. In fact, Jesus said, it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who's rich to enter the kingdom of God. They say, wait, who can be saved then? Who can be saved? And Jesus said, with man this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. And Peter says, dude, we have left everything to follow you. What's going to be left for us? Peter, the head of the Roman Catholic Church eventually. We have left everything to follow you. What then will there be for us? It's the old Job contract theory, right? Hey, look what we left. Pay up, Jesus, my Lord. Pay up. And he's not wrong, because we live with this notion. We do, is that, I'm going to go to church. I'll even grudgingly give 10% of my net, not my gross pay. So, pay up. Why did this bad thing happen to me? Why did my wife leave? Why did my father die? Why is the world like it is? I did this. Pay up. Jesus says, truly I tell you, at the renewal of all things, when the Son of Man sits on his glorious throne, you who have followed me will also sit on 12 thrones. Oh, you get a throne. Judging the 12 tribes of Israel. And everyone who has left houses, or brothers, or sisters, or father, or mother, or wife, or children, or fields, for my sake, will receive 100 times as much, and will inherit eternal life also. You would think eternal life would be, but no. But many who are first will be last, and many who are last will be first. Yeah, there's a contract. Well, I'm going to pay you later. You pay me now, I'll pay you later. And of course, Karl Marx would come along and say, hey, that's bullshit. But it would take about 1900 years. You remember in Matthew 21, Jesus entered the temple and drove out all those who were buying and selling in the temple, and overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who were selling doves. This is a pretty consistent theme in Jesus' work and life, is that you got to keep this stuff separate. But there's still a payoff. It's just, I'm going to pay you not in money, but in eternal life. Most people probably don't know this verse, but I too remember this growing up. This created a lot of trouble. This is Mark 6. And Jesus summoned the 12, the apostles, the disciples, and began to send them out in pairs and gave them authority over unclean spirits. And he instructed them that they should take nothing for their journey. Nothing. Except a mere staff. No bread, no bag, no money in their belt. Just wear sandals. Do not put on 2 coats. Christians are to take no money as they go out. Yeah, so you get the idea. Now, this notion, as money as the root of all evil, as money as dangerous, as money as ultimately unnecessary, and not the proper type of currency that you need to be working in, this carries through. A lot in Christianity does not carry through, but this carries through. This notion carries through from Jesus' teaching. Usury, the charging of interest on money, is considered an abomination in Christian theology. And it was so from the early church fathers to the Reformation, basically. Because remember what started the Reformation? One of the things that started the Reformation was the Catholic Church selling indulgences, right? So, yeah, you did some sin, drop a coin in, you're done. Go back out, do some more sin, because we need some more coin. This, up until then, it's a pretty consistent notion in Christian theology that that money cannot earn interest. Augustine calls it the spiritual fornication. Money, and he uses the term for childbirth, tokos. Is it there? Yeah, there it is, right above. Tokos, he uses the term for child. Money cannot give birth to money. This is wrong. Dante puts usurers, people who charge interest, he puts them in his 7th circle of hell. There's a lot of bad people above the 7th circle of hell. I mean, and a lot of bad things. But usury, remember there are 9 levels, and he puts them in the 7th. And the reason is, according to these theologians like Augustine in 400 and St. Thomas Aquinas in the Middle Ages, is that Usury is the theft of time. Interest is the theft of time. Because how does interest grow? Over time. And you can't make time into money. Well, without sinning, you can't. You cannot make time into money, according to Christian theology. Because if you're messing with time, you're messing with the very foundation of creation. And remember, this religion of Christianity comes from Judaism, and they're both grounded in history. They're religions of history. They're religions of time. And so if you're trying to make money off time, you belong in the 7th level of hell, because this shall not be. We got over that pretty quickly. Money is a language. In fact, it's the perfect symbol of deconstruction. So some of you are already starting to roll your eyes. Here he goes again. But it is. Money is like a language. Money is arbitrary. It can be anything. Words can be anything. In fact, so many things have been used as money throughout our history on this planet. Cowrie shells, stalks, anything that can serve as that mediator. It doesn't matter what it is. And of course, if you're incarcerated, apparently it becomes cigarettes, right? Anything can be money. Anything. Because there's nothing outside the system grounding it. Post-structuralists and deconstructionists would say because there's no transcendental signifier or there's no gold standard. We don't need the gold standard. All you need to know is that if I give you $10, you will give me a venti caramel latte. Soy, no whip. You will give me that for this. That's all we need to know. What if there's a new shop in Santa Monica that says, I'm going to charge you $20 for that? There will be people who will say, sure, here's my 20 for that same thing. It doesn't matter. It's completely arbitrary. It depends on the exchange value, like language, which depends on what the two people agree upon. Language is consensus. Money is consensus. I agree that this venti latte is worth $20 now. And its value, like language, is based on this implicit, tacit agreement that we make between ourselves. Right? For example, this lecture is free and worth every penny. Because we've made a determination that content in 2019 is extremely difficult to charge for, and besides, this is the kind of content that everybody should have. And Manly Hall thought that in 1934, and we still try to live by that, which is why we're so poor. Did you see the text to give number? The value changes, just like the value of words changes. And because of all this, because it's a social construction, because it's arbitrary, there's nothing grounding money in any sort of thing outside the system like the gold standard. It's an invitation for the powerful to come in and use it, right? As with language, as with religion. Money, interestingly, is also a measure. It's one of our favorite measurements, and that's part of its utility, its role in our society. The role of money in measurement, says Carruthers, is provided the timely inspiration at the dawn of the Western scientific tradition. The monetization of the Western European economy in the 13th and 14th centuries had a dramatic impact on the thinking of scientists. Monetization meant measurement, quantification, and commensuration. It is the common denominator not just for lattes, but for market exchange, and makes all these different currencies, different markets, different objects within the markets for sale. It makes them all commensurate in some ways. You can buy anything with any of these systems, whether it's the Chinese yuan or the euro. I was thinking of Brexit, sorry, or the dollar. All right. This is repeating Aristotle to a degree, but it bears repeating. Monetary valuation facilitates market exchange by breaking the constraints of barter. This is Carruthers, I'm quoting again. If a horse owner doesn't want pigs, she can still sell her horse for cash and use that money to buy whatever she wants. In addition, monetary valuation allows people to manipulate numbers in ways that shed light on the objects to which those numbers are attached. So I mentioned a few weeks ago that I was on jury duty for 2.5 weeks, and it was fantastic. I highly recommend it. I think I got lucky. I got a very interesting civil case. I didn't have to send anyone to jail. In fact, I got to give this poor guy a whole bunch of money. But that was the point. This man had suffered. It was pretty clear he had suffered. What's the value of that suffering? How do you place a value on it? How do you not? Right? And that's money. It's always imperfect and it's always necessary. By the way, the guy got $4 million. You're welcome. So, I don't want to get into this too much, but as you know, this creates the emergence of the state, because the state becomes not only the controller of money, but the generator of money. And I didn't know this, but there's some really interesting research out there that says, well, I probably don't know what I'm talking about, but this is not my area, but like Bernanke and some of the other economists said, why don't we just print money? And I always heard that would create inflation, too many dollars chasing too few goods. But seems to be some sort of consensus about this, that we should just print more money and give it to people. That would be a winning platform, I would think. So, money as God. Money when money goes from its signifying function to its symbolizing function, it's right next to the divine. So you remember from some of our other talks that Rudolf Otto, for example, described religion as mysterium tremendium et fascinans, an experience of tremendous mystery and fascination. And that was religion, because you don't need, but in the experience of religion is to experience something larger, more powerful than you. That's money. That's been money all my life, maybe yours too. I can't control it. It's awe-inspiring. I'm amazed by what it can do, and yet it acts on me more than I act on it. Right? It produces a mysterious fear and fascination. And therefore, it becomes a totem. So it's not uncommon, in fact, it's fairly common for primal peoples to take that experience of religion and make something concrete of it, a totem or a fetish, to say this is the thing that represents that other thing, right? Money is that for us, isn't it? Because in Job's contract, for us to live Job's contract, in 2019 is to have money. And don't think that American preachers have not realized this, right? It goes all the way back to the 18th century, that if you want to know if God loves you, you just look at how much money you have. And they were brilliant rhetoricians. They turned this right into the gospel of wealth. And it works because it appeals to our more craven tendencies. There's a great essay in The Atlantic from, 57, something like that, by Harvey Cox, the Harvard theologian, where he talks about the market as God. He's a theologian. He studied religion all his life, and I forget, an editor or somebody asked him to comment on the market. And so he says, well, I don't know anything about economics, but I'll try to see. And so he goes into this research on the market, and he's like, oh my God, I know exactly what this is. This is theology. And I won't rehearse the entire argument because you can see where it's going. The market has gods. The market ultimately is God, because it's an inscrutable thing that affects you so much that some people might kill themselves, some people might get immensely wealthy. But the point being, you don't know what it's going to do. You just don't know. And yet, you've put, if you're able to exist in the market, you've put your future into its hands. It is theology, he says. All right. You know this story of the golden calf, maybe? Let me read it to you because I think it's really interesting for our topic tonight. This is from Exodus, book of Exodus in the Torah. Moses, remember, has led his people out of Egypt, and they're wandering in the desert, the Negev desert right now. It's about a 1-year journey from Egypt to what would become the Promised Land, to Canaan. It takes them 40 years because they go like this. So they're a lot like us on our path. We go like this. Could be, and I don't know if you do this. I do this all the time. I look back, I'm like, I could have done that in a year. Why did it take me 20 years to learn that? Could have done it in a year. Anyway, they're problematic. They're whining. They're not out of Egypt very long. They're like, man, the leek soup was really good back there. And Moses is like, you were slaves. And they're like, yeah, I know, but at least we had a roof over our head. Yeah, you know. So Moses has gone up to Mount Sinai to get the 10 Commandments, and he's gone for 40 days. Now when the people saw that Moses delayed to come down from the mountain, the people assembled around Aaron, Moses' brother, and said, come, let us make a God who will go before us. As for this Moses, the man who brought us up from the land of Egypt, we don't know where he is. He's gone. And Aaron said, all right, cool. Tear off the gold rings that are in the ears of your wives, your sons, and your daughters, and bring them to me. And then all the people tore off the gold rings that were in their ears and brought them to Aaron. And he took this from their hand and fashioned it with a graving tool and made it into a molten calf. And they said, this is your God, O Israel, who brought you up from the land of Egypt. No, it isn't. But okay, this is your God. Now when Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it. He's like, yeah, sure. Moses? Who's Moses? I seem to remember maybe a Moses guy. No, this is your God. This golden calf. This thing socially constructed, right? Made of everybody contributing something. And Aaron made a proclamation and said, tomorrow will be a feast to this new Lord. So the next day they rose early and offered burnt offerings, sacrifices, the divine currency, and brought peace offerings, and the people sat down to eat and drink and rose up to play. There it is. To make a god out of money. It's so easy. It's right there all the time, right? It's right there. I mean, it's so clear. It's none of this Joe bullshit where there's a bet going on behind me that I don't know about. And I could lose everything. It's right. I'm not going to lose this. It's right here in my hand. I always think of the Alice Walker poem where she talks about giving her soul to a man, and he clenched it so hard that her soul shrank to fit his hand. This is your God. Meanwhile, God is up on the mountain, and you choose to stay in the plain. So much there. I never really saw that story for what it's worth until I saw it through this lens. All right. Money is also a monster. Money is a god. Money is also a monster. And when we talked about monsters in our other series, Gods and Monsters, we used Jeffrey Jerome Cohen's notion of monster culture, which has 7 theses. And I want to move quickly through this because we could get really in the weeds on monster culture. It's pure culture. And monsters are pure culture. They're made out of us. They're made out of the things we make. Like Frankenstein, they're made of many different pieces. Money is pure culture. We make it. I mean, we literally create it as a group. We generate it. Money's always with us. Cohen says the monster always escapes. Money is always with us. It always escapes. We'll never be without it. Even Jesus said, the poor you'll have with you always. Money's a problem. The word monster is the same Latin root as demonstrate. It shows us something about us. Money shows us something about us. It marks difference. Those who have it, those who don't, it's one of our favorite ways of determining the caste system in America is socioeconomic class. It's a threshold guardian. You must have so much money to enter this neighborhood or this bar or this studio. Cohen says, fear of the monster is a kind of desire. I really like this. Fear of money is a kind of desire. And like Frankenstein, money is ours. We gave birth to it. We created it. So, money and meaning, the power of transcendence. Money is a path to wisdom. Yes. For me, certainly, in as much wisdom as I have, money has been a ruthless teacher. Absolutely ruthless. I'm still being abused by money. And that's a kind of self-abuse, because what matters and what gives money power is what you think of it and what you think it is and what you think it does. There's a book in our bookstore called The Wisdom of Money that's really good. And he is a professor, and he talks about his youth when he didn't think about money and how wonderful that was. You know, do you remember that? I mean, maybe some of you are still there. Oh my God, that was amazing. You just didn't think about money. You know, if you ate, you had a couple bucks, and so you ate, and then you'd wait for the next couple of bucks, and then for the next meal. There's a liberation in that. Of course, it's a great danger. Money threatens to redirect our desire, just as a god threatens to redirect our desire. Our desire is for wisdom. Our desire is for the great mystery, not the God. The God isn't the great mystery. The God is a vehicle on the way to the great mystery. If you stop at God, you've stopped short. Money, the great God who says you've arrived. You don't need to go any further. You're done. And of course, we know, because some of our favorite documentaries are about how that's untrue, because people who have money lose it in dramatic ways sometimes. Money reveals absence. Money reveals what you don't have as much as what you have. It is a via negativa. It is a negative path. You get to God, and you ultimately get to the great mystery by finding where it is not. It is clearly not in money, and yet we clearly get trapped there. It's a stupid kind of power. It may be the dumbest kind of power in existence. I think we're especially attuned to that now, maybe. I think we were seduced by it in previous administrations, but now we see. We see how the 26 people in the world who own more than the rest of the world combined, how they think, their mythology, their ethics, their behavior. It's stupid power. You simply have it and you have power. You didn't earn it, or maybe if you did, you still don't earn the power that comes from it. Because it's not in that. It's not in the bills or the balance sheet or the portfolio. That's a poor, empty sign, ultimately empty sign. Manly Hall had this to say about money. I thought it was pretty interesting and apropos. It is with hesitance and regret that we mention another problem, which is a burdensome hangover from the past, the economic system. It has been said that money is the root of all evil. This is not true. So Manly's going against the New Testament. Money merely intensifies acquisitiveness, and under its temptation, practically every type of crime has been committed. All reforms, public policies, and political allegiances are involved in the mystery of wealth. This must also be given a thorough examination. Coinage was established to simplify the merchandising of articles and products. Today, there is little use in going back over the past. No lasting solution for any major world problem is possible without a major reform of the monetary system. It was simply a convenience. It was easier to carry around on your belt a bag of coins than to drive a flock of sheep down the main street. It is obvious that as long as we must participate in barter, we must tolerate this rather compelling nuisance called money. By degrees, we have sold ourselves to the concept that wealth is the most important thing in all the world. If you can buy it, it is cheap at any price. If you can buy it, it is cheap. And if you cannot get it, you are the most forlorn of human beings. We have another series of illusions. We believe that the silver dollar is a kind of robot that can work for us while we sit back and recreate. It can get us anything we want, whether we need it or not, and it can take us anywhere we want to go, even though we have no reason for the trip. Regardless of how it is juggled, money is always far more addictive than morphine or cocaine, and is always here providing the most convenient way to finance our personal delinquencies. How can we ever bring the world out of its perpetual bankruptcy unless we control the almighty dollar? As we approach the new century, I think this was 1988, we can look back and see what money has done to us and the little that it has done for us. Eliminate speculation and there will be no need to build more prisons. Let me say that again, or let Manly say it again. Eliminate speculation, the market, and there will be no need to build more prisons. The courtrooms will be empty most of the time. Serious crime would be exceptional, and we would be free from the heavy psychological burden of debt. Financial panics would be impossible. Wall Street would not collapse periodically, and few building and loan companies would fail. And then finally, this is the great British poet Philip Larkin. Quarterly, is it? Money reproaches me. Why do you let me lie here wastefully? I am all you never had of goods and sex. You could get them still by writing a few checks. So I look at others and what they do with theirs. They certainly don't keep it upstairs. By now they have a second house, a car, and a wife. Clearly, money has something to do with life. In fact, they have a lot in common. If you inquire, you can't put off being young until you retire. And however you bank your screw, the money you save won't in the end buy you more than a shave. I listen to money singing. It's like looking down from long French windows at a provincial town. The slums, the canal, the churches ornate and mad in the evening sun. It is intensely sad. Thank you. Thank you very much for your attention. I don't know if you can read that, but that's a coin from 5th century BCE with Athena, or Minerva, well, it would have been Athena then, impressed on it. Isn't that great?